Welcome to the Black Bibliophile podcast. The Black Bibliophile is a podcast where I, Jazz, read and talk about popular and little-known books, comics, zines, and authors. To quote Haruki Murakami, if you only read the books that everyone else is reading, you can only think what everyone else is thinking. And with that, let's start the show. Welcome back, guys, to the Black Bibliophile podcast. It's me, your host, Jazz, and today is a special episode that I am excited to share with you all. Sorry for any background noise, trying to get comfortable here. So this week's episode, or this special episode, I'm talking about Howl's Moving Castle, the novel, by Wynne Jones. So let's just hop in here. It's going to be really fun. I'm going to analyze the book in comparison to the Studio Ghibli movie. So we're going to have a little mixed media going on in this episode. And I'm very excited to, hop on in. So yeah, let's start off first with Howl's Moving Castle, the book, which is what came first. So I'm going to read a couple of facts about the book, give you a summary, and we'll go from there. So, Howl's Moving Castle by Wynne Jones was first published in 1986 by Green Willow Books of New York. Here's a summary of the book. Howl's Moving Castle is the first novel in this series of books called the Howl series. This series also includes Castle in the Air, published in 1990, and The House of Many Ways, published in 2008. WorldCat reports that Howl's Moving Castle is the author's work most widely held in participating libraries, followed by its first sequel, Castle in the Air. For the idea, Jones very much thanked a boy in a school I was visiting, whose name she had noted but lost and forgotten. He had asked me to write a book titled titled The Moving Castle. Sophie has the great misfortune of being the eldest of 3 daughters, destined to fail miserably should she ever leave home to seek her fate. But when she unwittingly attracts the ire of the Wish of the Waste, Sophie finds herself under a horrid spell that transforms her into an old lady. Her only chance at breaking it lies in the ever-moving castle in the hills, the Wizard Howl's castle. To untangle the enchantment, Sophie must handle the heartless Howl, strike a bargain with the fire demon, and meet the Witch of the Waste head-on. Along the way, she discovers that there's far more to Howl and herself than meets the eye. So, I got this book as a gift from my friend Rosie, and she completely was great, and she's like, oh, you should read this book, it's amazing. And I was like, you know what, I'm definitely going to read this book. So, it took me about a year, but I picked it up recently, and I loved it. So, the book is completely different from the movie, but I think of them as 2 separate entities. Like, one is a little more mushy, heartfelt, cheesy, and the book is a little more based in reality. If there can be a book about wizards and moving castles and fire demons based in reality, it would be this one. And yeah, so Sophie is the eldest of 3 girls. Her father has died, and she's left in the care of her stepmother, who by no means is like an evil stepmother. She's just a woman who's trying to keep her daughters together and also make sure they have the best chance at life. So she sends her youngest daughter off to work as an apprentice under a famous wizard, and then another daughter off to go work in a bakery where she has the most prospects in meeting a husband. So the 2 girls switch unbeknownst to their stepmother and to Sophie, their older sister. And Sophie only finds out when she goes to finally visit her younger sister at the bakery, who lives in the same town as her. And she realizes, or her sister tells her, oh, I switched places with Letty. And it's like they used magic to do it. And what was interesting to me was in this part was like completely taken out the movie, which I think it makes sense because you can't have there's only so many storylines you can fit into like a 2-hour film. But I digress. We'll talk about the film later. You can obviously tell I saw the film before I read this book. Sophie, though, she stayed at home and worked in her family's hat shop, and she created all of these wonderful hats that like one hat she created kind of lured this girl into dating a count or some, I think it was like a count or a baron or something. She wore the hat and all of a sudden she couldn't get the men off of her. And so all of these hats that Sophie makes have these wonderful properties. And one day, on her way to visit her sister at the bakery, she runs into this mysterious man who helps her get across town during the bustling March Day fair. And then later on that night, the Witch of the Waste visits her in her hat shop and basically, long story short, puts a curse on her. She becomes an old woman. She decides she has to leave because nobody can see her like this. She doesn't know how she's going to explain it. And she doesn't want to be a burden. So she sets off into the wild to figure out what's wrong with her. And then she finds a stick because she's an old lady. She needs a walking stick. And she talks to it and all of that stuff. And later on, we find out that she's a witch herself. Like, she talks to objects and imbues them with magic. So, like the hats, she tells the hats they're very pretty hats, and one day you'll fetch a nice prince, or one day you'll do this, and it imbues that hat with that spell, and it does do whatever she said the hat will do. So, Sophie finds this stick, and she ends up basically at the moving castle, and Calcifer, who runs the castle, the fire demon, lets her in and says he'll let her stay if she helps break his curse and break his bond with Howl. Sophie, now an older woman who's like set free from all the boundaries of being a young woman and having to be like kind and sweet, she's very blunt. She's like, I don't know, man, what's in it for me? And Calcifer's like, you know, I might be able to help you get that curse off of you or whatever. And she's like, all right, cool, bet. I'm gonna try to figure out what's going on between you and Howl. But the problem is Calcifer, the part of his curse, he cannot talk to her or tell her any specifics about her curse, about his curse. And she can't really talk, and she can't talk about her curse unless someone else already sees that she's under a curse. So there's a lot of people not being able to talk about their curses in this book unless they know about it beforehand. Like, say I was cursed to be an old woman. If you walked up to me and was like, oh, are you under a curse? I wouldn't be able to physically tell you that I was under a curse. You would just have to be a magician and see the weird magical aura dripping off of me or some shit. So Sophie's like, okay, I'm going to help you figure out how to break this curse with Howl, and you can go off and do your fire demon stuff. And then she's like, but we have to come up with a story as to why I'm staying here so Howl doesn't get suspicious. And she looked around the moving castle, and it was a wreck. There were spiders everywhere. There's dust everywhere. There's food just laying out. There's dirty dishes piled to the ceiling. And she's like, okay, I'll be your cleaning lady because this place is disgusting. And Calcifer is like, cool. So then Howl's apprentice comes downstairs, Michael, and he's like a teenager around 16, 17, I think, described as dark-skinned. So he's like a black kid, and he's like, who's this random old lady? Calcifer's like, she's a cleaning lady. Don't worry about her. And he's like, I don't know if Howl's gonna like this, but okay. And he goes to answer the Pemberley door. So in Howl's castle, the doors, they change, they revolve. And he has different doorways to different cities, and he's a magical wizard in different cities. So they provide potions and stuff, and that's how they take their income. And basically, let me just not like break down the entire book word by word, chapter by chapter. She does all this, she starts cleaning, and Howl comes home, and he's like, what's going on, Calcifer? How is she getting you to bend to her will? Because Sophie's like, you know what? You don't have to eat cold cereal this morning. There's a suitable fire right here. You've got eggs. You've got bacon. Let's make breakfast. And Michael's like, Calcifer doesn't let anybody but Howl cook on him. So she basically bends the fire demon to her will. Like, if you don't let me cook on you, I'm going to put you out, in her sassy Sophie ways. And he's like, man, she ain't right. Just bullying me around. So she cooks breakfast, and as she's cooking breakfast, Howl walks in and pushes her aside, and is like, "Man, Calcifer, you gonna let her do you like that?" Whatever. And he basically is like fine with Sophie being there. He doesn't kick her out. He doesn't really even react to her presence. He's just like, all right, fine. And he told her, as long as you don't bother the spiders or kill any spiders, because the spiders are his friends apparently, she can stay. And the story goes on and on like that. Basically, she's at the house, she's cleaning, she's trying to figure out the curse between Calcifer and Howl, and at the same time she's watching Howl because he has this thing where he steals girls' hearts, and really what he's doing is he makes these women or these girls fall in love with him, and that's like the whole goal, to make them fall in love with him. And the minute they fall in love with him, he's like, this is boring, you're boring, I'm leaving, and breaks hearts all over the kingdom or wherever they live. And it's just a really, like, everybody's a little more crass and a little more real in this book. And it's less like a fairy tale and more like, these are just people hanging out. And Sophie's got mad attitude all the time, especially towards Howl. And Howl's like this pretty boy. He's like a pretty boy, whiny guy. And who's always running away from responsibilities. And the interesting differences between this book and the film, which let's just dive into that. Let's dive into the film and then I'll talk more about their differences. So Howl's Moving Castle, the movie, directed by Hayao Miyazaki, was released in 2004. And the story is set in a fictional kingdom where both magic and early 20th century technology are prevalent, against the backdrop of the war with another kingdom. The film tells the story of a young, content maligner named Sophie. After she is turned into an old woman by a witch who enters her shop and curses her, she encounters a wizard named Howl and gets caught up in his resistance to fighting for the king. Influenced by Miyazaki's opposition to the United States invasion of Iraq in 2003, the film contains strongly anti-war themes. Miyazaki stated that he had a great deal of rage about the Iraq War, which led him to make a film which he felt would be poorly received in the U.S. It also explores the theme of old age, depicting old age positively as something which grants the protagonist freedom. The film contains feminist elements as well and carries messages throughout the value of compassion. In 2013, Miyazaki said the film was his favorite creation, explaining, "I wanted to convey the message that life is still worth living, and I don't think that's changed." The movie is thematically significantly different from the book. While the book focuses on challenging class and gender norms, the film focuses on love and personal loyalty and the destructive effects of war. So Miyazaki took a wild twist with this book. He was like, I'm going to try to push some anti-war themes, which a lot of Miyazaki films do have that. Like if you've seen Nausicaa and the Valley of the Wind, or even Princess Mononoke, but Princess Mononoke leans less on war themes and more like save the planet. But yeah, Howl's Moving Castle, the Miyazaki film focuses more on the relationship between Howl and Sophie and how soft and loving it is. Like it's more of a love than like an aggressive, I guess, that the book has. The book is like aggressively like, I mean, I guess you're cute and we can date at the end of it. And you're just like, all right, I guess. Don't get me wrong, I love the book and I love that it ends that way, that they're two like cranky people who are just like, I mean, we could do this. And they're like, all right. And then it goes off. Not goes off, but the book ends and you're like, I guess they lived happily ever after. The differences between the book and the film are like the book is based more in a real place. It comes more from a more authentic, less fairy tale like vibe. So when you like, there's certain parts like, so the dark portal in the book of Howl's Moving Castle is actually where Howl comes from, because Howl isn't from the realm that Sophie and all the other characters are from. He's from Wales, which I thought was wild. He's from Wales, which threw me off when I was reading the book, because all of a sudden he like goes through the black portal with Sophie and Michael, and they go into his nephew's room and he's playing like Nintendo or PlayStation, and I'm like, wait, what's happening? And also in the book, the magical realm that they live in has no cars or airplanes or anything like that. So when they go into the whales realm, they're like, oh shit, they're cars, what the hell are these? And they start freaking out, which was kind of funny. But no, it's interesting. Oh, and when I say Wales, I mean like Wales, the country in the UK. Like it's in like physically Wales. Like he's wearing soccer jerseys, and he has a Welsh accent and all of it. It blew my mind, and I kind of love that part. But the Black Portal in Howl's Moving Castle, the film, is like an entry into Howl's soul itself, and it's how Sophie figures out the connection between Calcifer and Howl, and she's like led into this dark place where Howl's slowly morphing into a monster because he's taking part in this war. It's changing him and turning him into something inhuman, which leans into Miyazaki's commentary on war. And it's like, it's focused on Sophie needs to save him from this, needs to save him from turning into this war beast that he's become. So the two, one's a little more comical and the other one's kind of sorrowful and heartfelt. And I think that kind of explains the two mediums really well. They captured in the film, Miyazaki's film, they captured really well Sophie's life before being turned into a witch, and also captured well how Howl is like a kind of a stuck-up pretty boy, but they don't lean into how he's kind of emotionally manipulative just for fun and for shits and giggles. They don't lean into that in the film because, again, it's like a child's film, and this is a children's book, but it doesn't need to branch out into those themes of Howl's background that happened in the book, because, again, it doesn't have enough time to hop into that, and Miyazaki's aim isn't to show these two feisty people get together and, like, mend their differences to become some kind of couple. His goal is to show you war is bad and love can save us all. And also, old age is kind of dope because you're free to do whatever you want and say whatever you want, which I feel like Miyazaki, if you've seen any Miyazaki memes, which you should Google if you haven't, he's leaning into that. I'm an old person and I can say harsh things sometimes, and it's fine because it's funny and I'm old. And I like that he kind of celebrates that in this film. He celebrates being old instead of it being like something bad that happened to Sophie. It's just like it gave her more freedom to be herself and to go out into the world and figure out what she wants in life. And the same thing in the book. Like Diane Wynne Jones was like, okay, Sophie's pent up. She's stuck in her house. She's stuck with this hat shop, and she's afraid or knows that there's no future out there for her because she's the eldest. So instead, she was like, let's turn her old, and old people, you don't have enough time, so you just go out and do what you need to do. You just go out and live your life. And it gives her this freedom to realize, no, I don't want to do that. Yes, I want to do this. Oh, I should explore this more. I'm going to just do whatever I want. And I liked that freedom. And it also gave Sophie it gave her what's the word I'm looking for? It gave her the approval to just say what she's feeling. Like, it was like, okay, I'm old. Nobody cares about old people. So I'm going to just be me, and that's fine. So when she looks at Hal and he's being a brat, and she's like, you know, you're being a brat, and I'm just going to nag you and be like in your business and be nosy Sophie. That's what she does because she's a naturally curious person. And I found that really refreshing and interesting. Like, both the movie and the book celebrate getting older. And that's really dope. So yeah, I think now the book, the way it ends is kind of more, it kind of feels like mutually Hal and Sophie have their own things going on. Like, Sophie's a witch and she's doing all this, but they're merging their lives together because they like each other and they just want to see where it goes. Whereas at the end of the movie, they like fall madly in love. They never mention that Sophie has magical powers, and they fly off on their new flying castle and romantically gallivant into the sky now that Howl has a heart. And the same thing happened, like he got a heart in both books, the book and the movie, but it was different. Like they fell in love in the book, but it wasn't a fairy tale like happily ever after ending. It was like, and now we're together. It was like, and now we dating. And I was like, that's realistic. They're together now. They dating. Whereas in the movie, they fly off and it's heartwarming still. I just rewatched it after I read this book and you're like, oh, they fly off into the sky together. They're happy with their nice yard and Marco and the dog, and it's great and I love it. But also, side note, Marco is the name of Howl's apprentice in Howl's Moving Castle. He's a small little Japanese boy, I'm assuming, because everybody's Japanese, I believe, in Miyazaki's movies. Or like, he's white. He's either white or he's Japanese. Either way, in the book, and he's like 10 years old, 9 or 10 years old in the movie. But in the book, he's like 17, in love with one of Sophie's sisters, I believe Letty, and he's black. He's described as black. I've read it over and over again. He's black. So I was like, I've never seen a black character in a Miyazaki movie, so I understand why. And also, small baby Marco turning into an old man is much cuter than a teenager, almost young adult, turning into an old man and answering the door. I don't know what the change was for. That's like the one drastic change in the characters of the book. Oh, and the Witch of the Waste. So the Witch of the Waste in the movie is depicted as this like overweight, gluttonous, sweaty, almost like melting popsicle, melting candle type character. And in the book, she's just skinny, red-haired, beautiful, but like scary. Think Hela from Thor Ragnarok. Beautiful, but like scary. So she's depicted like that in the book, but in the movie, she's like overweight and sweaty, and she looks sticky. That's the best way, is just sticky. And I found that problematic because of the depiction of fat people being evil. It wasn't necessary. It was unnecessary. She was way eviler in the book. She was trying to kill kids and stuff and like drown people. And she was a skinny, redheaded woman who was on a murderous rampage to destroy Howl. But in the book, it was like she was fat for like comedy and just showing like evil people are fat. I don't know. I wasn't about it. I thought it was problematic and I didn't enjoy that change of character in the book. And I thought, if you just stuck with the vicious, like almost Maleficent looking character leering always around every corner instead of this really slow, heavy breathing, like her walking up the stairs in the film, and the Witch of the Waste almost turns into a pile of flesh. It is just weird and unnecessarily gross. Like I don't understand that change either. But despite that, everything else is basically the same. And I like the way they depict magic in the film with the little figures dancing around every time they do magic, and the falling stars like running on the water and then fading away and dying. Both mediums are great. Both the film and the movie are great, but they are definitely two separate things. Often people get upset when the books aren't translated completely and totally into the film versions. They're not completely, like, another example, like Watchmen. Everybody knows about Watchmen the comic. People get upset when they realize that Watchmen is different, isn't completely like the comic, even though for the most part the movie is like frame for frame the comic, however you may feel about that. It's only missing like the comic book with the Sea Mariner or whatever, which the extended version has that. And if you want to watch a 4-hour movie, go for it, but not necessary. This are two different things. They both have similar characters and similar themes, except the movie has more anti-war themes than the book. but they're essentially two different things, and I've approached them that way. So I love the book. The book is great. It's funny. It's heartfelt. It's weird. It's magical. It's fantastic. It's entertaining. And the book is this sweet, beautifully animated tale about a woman trying to, find her boo or whatever. So I think they're both really great, and I think I did just minimize the greatness of Howl's Moving Castle, the movie, but there's only so much you can say. You just gotta watch it. It's like a fairy tale is the best way to explain it. It is like a fairy tale, and a beautiful fairy tale. It's a great movie. I love all of Miyazaki's movies, but yeah, they're completely different, and that's okay. And yeah, that's all I have to say about Howl's Moving Castle. I hope you guys enjoyed this random special episode. I'll be back next week to talk more about random books, but also my podcast was just uploaded to Apple Podcasts after weeks, more like months of trying to figure out why it wasn't uploading. I figured out the problem. I solved it. It got fixed, and now we're live on Apple Podcasts. So if you want to help me out, if you guys want to help the podcast out, go ahead and leave a review. Stars. I think it's stars. It's stars on Apple Podcasts. Leave some stars. Tell me if you hate it, if you love it, if you have any ideas of any books I should cover, if you like these episodes where I focus in more on one book and one subject. Leave that down there in the comments. You can also email me at theblackbibliophile@gmail.com, and I check that every week. You can also become a patron there. Become a patron on patreon.com. There I will have special essays come up, special episodes. I have new episodes up there early. I have a book club. And yeah, if you want to be a part of that life, please come join us on Patreon. It's only $1 a month to get all that special content. And I'm trying to put out as much content as possible for you guys. And yeah, that's all I got. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next week. Bye.